In three, two. Well, welcome to Zoom Along with Mitch. So, Larry King and I sat down at his home in December of 2018, and we covered the obvious questions. One asks a legend who's interviewed over 60,000 people over 62 years. And I'm going to link that interview to this one so you can kind of catch up. But today, in this early summer of our discontent, sorry, Shakespeare, in 2020, a year we would all like to forget, survive, and hopefully move on from the virus in the air and the virus that kind of is challenging our values and our democracy every day, and do it all without sports. I mean, although the sport Larry and I love so much, hopefully we'll be coming back in a few weeks. As you see, Larry's got his Dodger hat on. I've got my Met hat on. And I hope to God we get baseball soon, Larry.
Yeah, we will. Have you seen all the parameters, though, they have to undergo? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I
You can't argue with the ump.
mhm.
No instant replay. If it goes extra innings, there's a man on second base. You could have 30 men on a team. They got to limit how close they sit in the dugout.
Mhm.
Another, when an out is made, you can't throw the ball around the infield.
I know you can't. It's hard to believe. It's not. You know. And our last interview, you talked about Bob Newhart and his great description of baseball and what the game is, which I love. And I don't know what this game will be, but if opening day the Mets and Yankees have Jarrett Cole against DeGrom, and it, obviously it won't be there, but be fun to watch it if it happens.
Will definitely the Mets and Yankees be in the same division?
Yes, that's what they've said. The Mets, Yankees, Phillies, Red Sox, Orioles. Um, I don't know how they're working it with the Marlins and the Blue Jays, though. Although I heard the Blue Jays will probably play in Florida. That's the last that I heard. But
Yeah, the Midwest is pretty much as is, huh? The
yeah,
Central Division.
I think so. I think so. But like we'll see. There's a lot of things that are going to happen, and we'll hope for
Tough
the
part
best.
is all the Dodger fans who are waiting to boo the Houston Astros.
Exactly. And you got
Not get the opportunity. I would have been leading the group. I was at all 7 games of that World Series, and I tell you, that 5th game was the strangest game I had ever seen. I was with my 2 boys. They couldn't. When Kershaw came in with a 7-4 lead, and they belted him all over the lot, and he said, I remember vaguely said like they knew it was coming. Oh, they did know what was coming.
Yeah, well, they they
Up for
they
that.
they knew exactly. Yeah, no, Dodger fans deserve that and deserve to get at the Astros, and maybe a few pitches may go the wrong way. It should happen, but you got Mookie Betts too, so it's going to be exciting. So, Larry, this was supposed to happen over bagels in March, but I am glad that we are at least getting to have this chat today. And, as always, thank you for your time and a friendship that started as my first job out of college at age 21 in 1982, being your associate producer at Mutual Broadcasting for the #1 nationally syndicated Larry King Show. I even found some video recently, which is going to roll when they edit this. Where you were being profiled. I'm not even sure who it was for. It might have been 60 Minutes. I'm not sure, but it was the night John Dean was the guest. And I actually make a cameo appearance. Do you remember that night? That interview?
When they asked me recently, is that story that broke about the lady accusing Biden without mentioning
Right,
his
right.
that occurred on my show, and they asked me if I remember. I have no. I interviewed John Dean a number of times. I have no particular memory of that.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, I was there. I didn't remember there was a film crew. Just luckily found it on YouTube. I have no idea who even put it there. But anyway, a lot's happened since we sat down, and I want to start with you, and then we'll take on the world here. So first of all, how are you doing, Larry? Last year was rough. I know things were not so great for a while, but you seem good.
They were pretty rough. Starting in April, I had a stroke, and I didn't know. Then my whole family and everyone else tells me how bad I was. I have no memory of it, none. Um, I, I, I remember one day and the next day being in intensive care. And it's the only thing the stroke affected was my left foot. I have no control of my left. It's called a drop foot.
Right.
So I have to use a wheelchair or a walker, and I do physical training. But I've had every known disease. One of my doctors calls it my, what does he call it? My indomitable spirit,
Mm.
because he says I shouldn't be here. So there's something in me that fights off these things.
Oh, there is.
I don't know what that is,
Well, I mean, it actually in our last interview, you actually talked about that a little bit, and you talked about how the idea of death is something that's just beyond you of not being, like was
Not
and not was.
to not exist
Yeah.
is beyond the realm of my thought. Like, who, who's going to win the presidency? Who's going to win the next World Series? How's the NFL going to do? Is horse racing okay? The Kentucky Derby is going to allow people to come in. I got to know those things.
Of course, and and inside of you there was something fighting. I know it, and I knew you'd pull through, and But the last thing you imagined was to come out of this into a global pandemic, and I mean, what's life like for Larry King being quarantined?
Lucky enough to have his two sons with him.
Yes.
So I have a lovely apartment in Beverly Hills. My house, my wife and I separated. The house was just sold. Um, so I'm with my two boys, which is a great joy.
Yes.
They're both athletes. They both work out every day. Now they're into golf. They're golfing now.
Great.
And I'm very proud of them. One's 21 and one's 20. They're only 14 months apart. As they call that, Irish twins.
Yeah.
They're very different, though, in personality.
Sure. And they were drafted by the White Sox.
Both were drafted.
Yeah.
Both were drafted. They're
Right.
both excellent, although they're steering away. Cannon's now steering toward football, and Chance is more into going to school, investing. I don't know what he wants to be. He'd be good. He'd be a good sports announcer, Chance.
I'm sure he would. I'm
He
sure
got a good voice. And he knows the game well. He would be very good at baseball. But let them have their own way. And me, I'm 86 years old. I'm going to be 87, God willing, in November.
Right.
I can't believe I'm that old. I tell you, Mitch, I can't believe I'm 86. In my heart, I'm 80. I'm 43. I wonder what it's all going to be. I still have wonderment. I still do a show twice a week called Politicking on ET and Hulu. I still have my curiosity. I still look forward to the next show that has never left me.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought my whole career that I knew more than my guests. I'm more opinionated now openly. I never used to give my opinions. Now I do.
Right.
At this stage of my career, I can give opinions.
Exactly. And at this stage, I mean, we're living in times that, listen, and I've had this conversation with my 93-year-old mom who acts like she's 23. So I get it. But I had this conversation with her recently. I said, you lived through world wars and Cold Wars and 9/11, but obviously you were born in 33. You weren't around in 1918. So there's no playbook for a global pandemic. I was actually curious, though, if you had any memories back in Brooklyn growing up, if your family talked about the Spanish flu in 1918.
Interesting you bring that up. They did not. I have no memory of it. I was born in 33. I had lost a brother died before I was born. He was 6.
Mm.
He had appendicitis, and then it's just me and my brother. And my mother never remarried. My father died when I was 9.5 in 1943.
Right.
June 9th, 1943. But no, I never heard it discussed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, no memory of it at all.
It's
Naturally,
very interesting because I've talked to a number of people that were born around the same time as you and even before, and it wasn't discussed. And I'm wondering if it was just one of those things that people didn't talk about. You know, people were so different, and obviously, you know, there wasn't a world at all like today. We'll get into social media and all the craziness today. So,
well, this pandemic will. You're right. The transmission is so much modern technology everyone knows about, and the pandemic affected the whole world. I don't think 1918 did.
no,
I think it affected the United States and Canada. This one affected Upper Malaysia,
hmm
Lower Indonesia, Upper
Israel,
Luxembourg, Israel. Everybody was affected by it. We're
yeah,
all in the same boat. And the trouble with this administration, if I'm going to get to that, is
yes,
they don't see it at all. Trump acts as if it's gone. It's getting worse, by the way. The buildup is worse now
right,
than at its height. And we have a president who is clueless. Well, not clueless. He's interested only in himself. I know Donald 40 years. Always been good to me. We always got along. But this is the worst president. I can't imagine you being a worse president than Donald Trump.
Well, you beat me to it because
I
that was
know.
actually the question I was going to ask you because you have known him 40 years. And I mean, was there any indication during the time when you were interviewing him and being in New York and everything that the evil that we see today was actually inside of this guy, that he was such a
No,
sociopath?
I knew he was a narcissist. Naturally, everything was
Yeah,
okay. However, he was very generous. He was very kind to me. When I had some minor surgery in New York, he took my wife out to dinner the night before. I've had lunch with him at, at Friars Club. I spent a lot of time with him. He did a lot of appearances on my show, but I never saw him as a president. I saw him as a real estate mogul who did a lot of good things and a lot of wrong, bad things. He was bankrupt. You know, he had
right.
rough times. He was not popular among the New York intelligentsia.
No,
He was a moderate Republican. He supported Hillary
hmm
for the Senate.
right.
His politics were, I would call, in moderation.
Yeah,
Always hated China, but I never pictured him as president. But I had no idea that he'd be this bad. My friend Charlie Steiner, the Dodger announcer,
right.
hated him from the New Jersey Generals when
Oh,
Trump owned that team. Charlie was the announcer.
I know. I noticed Herschel Walker sticking up for him on Twitter all the time. He must have paid him a hell of a lot of money.
But to me, he's the worst kind of personality you can have a president. You can't be a president and only think of yourself. That doesn't work to just think of yourself. And that's all he does. So it's sad. It's sad. And I think unless something drastic happens, I think they'll try to keep people away on the polls. We're
Yeah.
going to have a tumultuous election day, probably riots. But on January 20th, I think Biden will be sworn in.
Oh, I certainly hope so. Do you have a horse in the race on the vice president? Is there? I
I,
mean, Kamala Harris is your senator. You know.
yeah, she'd be my choice too. I like Kamala very much. She used to appear on my show a lot when she was district attorney in San Francisco. She's tough on law and order. If you want a law and order candidate, Kamala Harris is the woman. Very
Yeah.
smart. Did not run well when she
No.
ran. She was for somehow I never figured her out, but she did not do well.
Right.
But she would do well as a vice president. The public would like her.
hmm Do you think? Bill Maher talks about this all the time. That even if Trump loses, he won't leave.
Well, I know Bill very well. He's a good
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
That can't happen. Now, what he would try to do is, no matter what, he would say it's rigged. He would try to go to court to stay in. He would fail, and the United States Marshals, along with Washington police, would carry him out on January 20th. That's the Constitution. You can't change January 20th.
Exactly. And that's I hope
But
he
he
just
will.
leaves quietly. But yeah.
We know already he
Yeah.
will say it's rigged. It was rigged.
Yeah. Oh, no matter what. I mean, that's I think
Write-in
everybody's
votes.
fear.
He's against write-in votes because they
Yeah.
fraud.
Right. Right.
Below me.
Yeah, well, he's playing every game in the book. So, if you had the opportunity, and you may, I know we'll get to the podcast that you're starting soon, but what would you be asking Trump today? You've always said this to me that I could interview anybody. If I was sitting down with Hitler, I would have asked him this, or if I,
Well, you know what? What disturbs me, and at Prescott, whenever he takes questions, no one ever asks him the following: what mistakes you think you've made?
Hmm.
Now, knowing Trump, he will have a tough time with that because he never admits a mistake. When you ask anybody what mistakes do you made, they're always going to think of some things. He will think of nothing.
Hmm.
So I would go from there. What mistakes, Donald, have you met? What don't you like about the job?
Hmm.
Do you miss New York? Does Washington bother you? Do you hate your opponents?
Hmm.
So I go a lot, but Mitch, I don't know the answer to the first question, so therefore I can't ask the second.
Exactly.
What if he suddenly lists a litany of mistakes, which he'll never do?
No, of course not.
No, the word is not in his lexicon. By the way, for presidents and politicians, he has the worst vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're hanging around with him, it's fine. Or he's in the White House and ain't so fine.
Oh, it's like you said. It's hands down. Richard Nixon and anybody else that they thought was the best president. He was a smart man, Richard Nixon.
I knew
Brilliant
Nixon
man.
well. Nixon, 3 times the president. First of all, domestically, Nixon did a lot of great work because
he did.
doing foreign affairs. But I knew Nixon, and Trump wasn't the person.
Not even close.
Guy.
Yeah.
Around. But I like Nick. I get along with Nixon because we talk sports.
Yeah. And your interviews with him are wonderful, and I've watched them a number of times, and you've obviously interviewed a lot of other presidents. I was fortunate enough to be in the studio the night you interviewed Jimmy Carter, which was fantastic and really elevated my appreciation of him. Learning a little, being with him in person.
I like Jimmy a great deal. He was unfortunately, he'll go down in history as a failed president.
I know.
Largely because of the hostages in Iran.
Yeah. But I think Trump has put a whole new bar for failed presidents. There'll be Trump up here and then down here, maybe,
Oh, yeah. Trump. Shoot. Don't even talk about him.
Exactly. So obviously all of our minds have also been on the continuing social injustice in America, from George Floyd to Breonna Taylor recently. And it's so hard to see us as a country go back to the same BS that Dr. King fought so hard for and gave his life for. And I know, because I've known you for many years, I know that you had the privilege of interviewing, not just interviewing Martin Luther King, but actually being with him. And you have a story, I believe it was in Tallahassee, Florida, that I think puts it better than anything. I would love for you to tell that story, Larry.
Reply well today, too. My lawyer in Miami was Toby Simon, who was with the American Civil Liberties Union. He was a good friend. Martin Luther King was going to go to Tallahassee, capital of Florida, and he was going to try to go to a motel. They had reservations, and he had reservated this motel. And it was generally known that the motel wasn't going to take him. So the streets were lined up, and Tallahassee's kind of on a hill. And his lawyer was not allowed to, wasn't licensed to practice in Florida. Mm-hmm. So they asked Toby to be his lawyer, Martin Luther King's lawyer, for this motel incident. And then Toby asked me if I would like to go, and I said, sure. So we went on, and I was with Toby and Dr. King and others. And we walked up to the desk in the motel, and the clerk came out, and the clerk was very nice and said, yes. And Dr. King said, I have a reservation. And the clerk said, you know, we do not take Negroes. So Dr. King went out of the lobby and sat on the, it wasn't a huge hotel, so he sat on the front porch, like 3 little steps. He sat on the steps. We stood around him. And the owner of the motel comes out. I'll never forget this moment. He looks down, King is sitting, the owner standing above him, and the owner said, Dr. King, what do you want? What do you want? And King looked up and said, my dignity.
Mm.
I never forgot that. And since then, that's all they've asked for. However, I think something important has happened with George Floyd.
Yeah.
That I never expected to see. More have picked up around the world about George Floyd than Martin Luther King's assassination. This had such a carryover
Yeah.
as to be unbelievable. And Black Lives Matter is
Right.
become a national theme. You know, the
Mhm.
other day, the vice president refused to say it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, he refused to even say masks today, so that's no surprise for him. It's another.
Yeah, Martin Luther King was, but never in my history do I remember more of the coming together to bring about a really integrated society. I think those opposed are in the minority. And I'll tell you the lack of empathy that Trump has concerning the statues. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Trump is opposed to the desecration of any statue, southern or northern, period. Don't destroy our national treasures. Doesn't he have the ability to say the following? I'm opposed to destroying statues. I don't want to see a statue destroyed. And statues largely reflect our history. And there's a lot about our history that's not very good. And so I want my Black American friends to know that I understand their feelings when they see a Southern Confederate soldier as a statue. I don't like to tear down statues, but I understand how he don't even understand. He has no empathy at all, which is unbelievable.
No, zero. And you beat me to it because I was going to ask you about the statues and
Yeah.
it's not any empathy at all. So if you had the 9 o'clock hour again on CNN, well, you had it for 25 years. So what I would like to hear is your take on television news today, especially CNN, MSNBC, Fox. I mean, obviously everything is so divided, you know, and it's like sports. Everybody picks a team. They automatically hate each other. The Yankees are going to hate the Red Sox.
Not
Dodgers
news,
hate the Giants.
Mitch, not news. The only news I depend upon is 6:30 at night, David Muir or NBC or CBS. That's the only, that half hour. It's the only news in America. What you get on the cable channels is all opinion, a lot of vitriol, all opinion. So if I go to Fox News, which is unintelligible to me,
Right. Yeah.
MSNBC is a channel I like because I'm liberal and they're liberal, but it's not news.
Right.
And CNN don't know what it is. So I can't call it news. I don't think we have news today. We have op-ed pages everywhere, but we have
Right.
the only news is the 3 networks that half hour a night delegated to them, which I wish they had more time.
Yeah, and BBC, which I watch a lot of too. Their news is wonderful. How do you think we got to this place, though? I mean, you know, we had all these years of CNN being news, with you doing the 9 o'clock hour, which was either whoever was in the news or entertainment or sports or just something for us to learn.
We got this way by technology. You know, there's a lot of good in technology, of course, a lot of
Right.
bad. And one of the bad, I think, is 500 networks.
Yeah.
So it cut the piece of the pie down to when Jackie Gleason went off the air, he had 33 million viewers. That's equivalent to a Super Bowl.
Hmm.
If you get a 5 share today, you're on top of the world. So the pie is so well cut up that no one sticks out. We don't have any Edward R. Murrows today. There are no Walter Cronkites today.
No Dan Rathers. No.
Dan Rathers, he was the last.
Right. And he actually,
Go
he's
on.
the best part of Twitter, in my opinion,
I
is
heard.
Dan Rather. He's the main reason to be on, because his views are very much aligned with exactly what you're saying. So when you think back on all the interviews over the years, what are a couple of takeaways that really made an impact on your life and on you as a person, or feel that their message also is very needed today? That, boy, you wish that interview they'd run that one.
Well, King, Martin Luther King certainly stands
Yeah,
out. Bill Clinton, uh, my interviews with him, my interviews with George Bush stand out. Frank Sinatra jumps at me, of course,
sure.
because he was a great interview. The Barbara Streisand interviews. You know, when I look at it, 62 years, 63 years, I forget people I've interviewed. I mean, it's gotten that bad, Mitch.
Well, it's
I had on,
60,000 interviews, Larry.
during the Balkan War,
Right.
I had on Milosevic's brother, who was his ambassador to Moscow. Milosevic was the head of Yugoslavia,
Right.
and his brother was ambassador to Moscow. On a break, the brother says to me, not on the air, my brother wants to send his best to you and your family. My family? Yeah, your children, how are they? I said, fine. What is your, he said, my brother was on your show. When they had the meetings in the United States, the Dayton Accord, he was on your show. So I had interviewed Milosevic and forgotten it. So it's hard, you know, when you've had so many chance to talk to so many, you know, I was a footnote to history.
Absolutely.
I was, there at the beginning. What's the title of Bolton's book?
Uh,
Something in the
2
room.
million, 2 million reasons I didn't testify. I don't know. That's my title.
No, his title was
Yeah.
In the Room, something
In
in
the
the room.
room. Yeah. The room where it happens. The line from Hamilton. Yeah.
That could be my title, easy.
Yeah.
That room at CNN where it happened
Yeah.
applies very well to me. I used to interview John Bolton too.
Yeah. Well, listen, wherever the room was, wherever you were, whether it was in Miami in the 60s, whether it was in Arlington, Virginia, you know, in the 70s and early 80s, and then obviously at CNN, and still today, you know, whether it's in the room you're sitting in, these are the places where it's happened, and you always speak to the right people.
By the way, to give Bolton his credit or whoever at the Simon and Schuster came up with it, that's a great title.
Yeah.
The room where it happened. It could apply to any biography.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Well, my guess is he stole it from Hamilton, because there's a whole song called "The Room Where It Happens." But we talked about Hamilton last time, and at that point you were telling me, you know, it was a little challenging to watch that. There's actually going to be on Netflix, on Disney, on July 3rd.
No,
Yeah.
that don't mean you're going to understand it. I swear to God, Mitch, I was prepared to love it. I sat with the whole of San Antonio Spur team was there that night, and Popovich sat right behind me, and I was excited, and I couldn't wait for it to begin. And then it began, and the only person I understood in the whole thing was King George.
Oh.
The lyrics went right by me. I couldn't keep up with it. There was some moments when I forgot who was, let's see now, who was Washington, and I got lost. It just,
Well, sure. Well, see, had the same actors playing different roles, and you know, you have to prep for that show. I mean, before we went to see it, before my kids saw it, we all knew the music. I mean, I obviously had read Chernow's book, but you kind of needed to know what was coming next, and almost really you needed the libretto if it was available.
I know. Well,
Yeah.
I should have had one that night. It was
Yeah.
like the opera.
I think, well, exactly, would have made a lot more sense. So last time we chatted about communications, and you were talking about a communications course that you did. And as we now have this work at home, this new normal, which people have now are communicating at all, everybody's leading webinars. Everybody's leading Zoom. I mean, if you just spend time in my house during the day, there's Zooms going on from People Magazine, Time Magazine, and UBS where I work. I mean, that's happening all over the world, okay? But you have people that have never really communicated like that. So what kind of things from your communication course, what kind of tips would you have in general that can help people communicate better with their employers and colleagues and clients or whatever?
I wrote that book. You can talk to anyone, anytime,
Right.
anywhere. I always brought it down to the basics of how to listen. Listening is very important. A lot of people don't listen. Be curious, ask short questions, uh, make great eye contact, make sure the person you're talking to knows you're talking to him or her. People, and by the way, talk to people about I've never met a person who didn't like to talk about what they do for a living.
Hmm.
Any person. And you talk to Sinatra about singing, talk to Jimmy Carter about politics. Everybody in it loves it. Um, and understand that. You know something, Mitch? Now I'm starting a podcast. This is a new world to me. Although podcasts must be the new radio.
It really is, Larry. I mean, having done radio, having been around radio, to me, I treat it just like radio. I know it's a different medium for a lot of reasons, but
I will do the same. I'm going to
yeah,
start it in July. In July, but I'll ask you because you would know.
sure.
How do people know where to tune into the podcast?
So these days, I guess Apple leads the way, like everything. So
Like
Apple has their own podcast channel. Anybody with an iPhone, okay, and that does not include you because I know you have your flip phone, and we've talked about that because you use your phone to make calls and you want to check sports scores, you turn on the TV, turn on ESPN, or you go to the game. But anyone that has an iPhone in the world has the ability to hear the majority of the podcast is an app that's right there. There's also other services like Spotify and Stitcher, and there's other Luminary. But in general, you could also just Google Larry King's podcast, and it'll come up. It just magically shows up. So there's no TV guide for podcasts, so to speak.
I start July 12th.
Mhm. Well, that's great. Who's your
Okay.
first guest?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do I inform? What do I do? Do I call Spotify? Do I call Apple to say there's a podcast? What
No,
do I
you don't
do?
have to. You don't have to do it. Whoever is, your son's working with you on this,
Right.
I believe, right? He will know exactly what to do because whoever is producing the podcast, it's called a feed, and they just send that feed out, and they send it to all of the major sources, and then it's your choice if you want to do any sort of advertising and promoting. But beyond that, it just exists,
Right.
and yeah.
If you're not selling advertising, what are you doing it other than for your own kicks?
Well, that's about it. I mean, the podcast that I particularly do with my firm, I don't sell advertising because I'm not allowed to, basically on that particular podcast. But many of the podcasts you've been on, a number of them. I just listened to one the other day with the comedian. I forget his name. He's on what show? But anyway, he did a commercial for underwear. He did a commercial for something to take to make your brain smarter. So everybody's got, all these different commercials. Maybe they run them just quickly in the beginning of the show. They're not really commercials. They just pretty much talk. And that's sort of their way of doing it. And that's how you make they pay for it. And right now, I tell you, it's an interesting time because there's such backlash against Facebook that a lot of major companies today are pulling all of their advertising dollars. And I heard a lot of them are going to go towards podcasts. So
Tell you what, Mitch, I gotta go, but I would like you to guest on one of my podcasts.
I would be so honored, Larry. That would just be a tremendous honor to
I
do
would,
that.
great talking to you, Mitch, because we had so many good times together.
We really did, Larry, and I'm glad that you look great and you're feeling great. And I was going to ask you to end with the Mappo story, but if you're in a rush, I understand. It's too long. As I wrote, if I wish I was back at Mutual, I would put the card in, And I will tell people, and there's actually a link on YouTube to the Mappo story, which to me is one of my favorite stories from Larry's childhood. Then there's the Belafonte story. I mean, there's a million of them. But my friend, thank you so much. It's always great to be with you,
Be
and wish
well.
you well. And let's go Mets and let's go Dodgers.
Leave a Dirch.
Okay, take care.